My name is Elena. I'm 28 years old. I live in Seattle, where the gray rain usually matches my mood after a phone call with my family. And last month, I did something that would get me banned from every family gathering for the rest of my life. Most daughters bring flowers, expensive jewelry, or a sentimental photo album to their mother's milestone 50th birthday party. I didn't do that. Instead, I walked into a room full of her closest friends, her book club, and my entire extended family carrying nothing but a cheap, portable Bluetooth speaker and a thick manila folder labeled evidence in black marker. For 28 years, I had been the prop in my mother Lydia's perfect life. I was the doll she dressed up, the bank account she drained, and the punching bag she used to make herself feel superior. But the moment she decided to cross the one boundary I had left, my mental health, was the moment I decided to stop being her daughter and start being her prosecutor. You might think that's harsh. You might think, but she's your mother, you only get one. And you're right, you only get one. But when that one person decides to call your therapist 14 times in a single week to scream that she's a homewrecker simply because I finally started setting boundaries, the rules of family loyalty stop applying. Lydia thought her 50th birthday was going to be her coronation. She stood up in her shimmering gold dress, holding a glass of champagne, and looked out at 25 people. She looked right at me, smirked, and said the sentence that sealed her fate. I just wish my daughter would stop letting that doctor brainwash her. She thought I would shrink. She thought I would cry in the bathroom like I did when I was 12. She had no idea that in my purse I had a recording that would turn her social standing into ash in less than 60 seconds. If you have ever been told you are too sensitive when you react to cruelty, or if you've ever had a parent who viewed your independence as a personal attack, you need to stay until the end of this story. You are going to see exactly how a $2,800 theft, a stolen insurance check, and one unhinged voicemail turned a perfect neighborhood party into a crime scene of reputation. I didn't just ruin her birthday, I exposed a lifetime of lies. And I have the receipts to prove every single word. Have you ever had a parent who couldn't handle the word no? Have you ever been accused of being brainwashed just because you finally started thinking for yourself? If you know exactly what that cold pit in your stomach feels like, drop a comment below. I want to know I'm not the only one. To understand why I walked into that party with a lawyer's letter in my purse, you have to understand who Lydia is. To the neighbors in our quiet suburban cul-de-sac, she is the saint of the community. She organizes the block parties. She brings casseroles when someone gets sick. She is the woman who always remembers your birthday and waves from her perfectly manicured porch. But inside the house, with the doors closed and the curtains drawn, Lydia was a different person entirely. She wasn't a mother, she was a director, and I was an actor who kept forgetting her lines. I learned early, around age 8, that my feelings were inconvenient obstacles to her image. If I cried because I scraped my knee, I was being dramatic. If I was proud of a drawing, I was fishing for compliments. But the moment I realized just how far she would go to maintain control happened when I was 12 years old. I was a shy kid. I was awkward, lanky, and uncomfortable in my own skin. I had just started a jazz dance class at the local community center. It was the one place where I felt like I could just move and be myself. We had a parents' observation day, and I remember being so nervous my hands were shaking. I was wearing a black leotard that felt too tight, standing in the back row near the bar. During a break, the instructor, a kind woman named Mrs. Halloway, complimented my posture in front of the other parents. A normal mother would have smiled. A normal mother would have said, "Thank you." Lydia didn't do that. She let out a sharp, breathless laugh that cut through the room like a knife. "Oh, don't encourage her," Lydia said, loud enough for every parent, every student, and every teacher to hear. "We're just trying to get her to be comfortable with her body, with her sweating problem and all." I froze. I didn't have a sweating problem. I had never had a sweating problem. But in that second, 20 heads turned to look at me. I felt heat flood my face. I looked down at my dry leotard, then back at my mother. She was smiling that tight, plastic smile she uses when she's winning an argument. The other mothers looked uncomfortable. Some of the girls giggled. "It's a medical thing," Lydia whispered loudly to the woman next to her, tapping her own temple. "Hormones. It smells terrible if she doesn't shower immediately." I didn't dance for the rest of the class. I stood by the wall, arms crossed over my chest, praying for the floor to open up and swallow me whole. When we got to the car, I asked her why she said that. She just checked her lipstick in the rearview mirror and said, "Elena, stop being so sensitive. I was just lowering expectations so you wouldn't feel pressure to be perfect. You should be thanking me." That was the pattern. humiliate me to help me, break me down to build me up. But while the emotional cuts were deep, the financial ones left scars that took years to pay off. And the defining moment, the one that really severed the bond between mother and daughter, happened when I was 19. I was a sophomore in college, working 2 part-time jobs just to cover my textbooks and rent because Lydia and my father claimed they didn't believe in handouts for adults. One night in October, I woke up with a pain in my side that felt like someone had stabbed me with a hot poker. I tried to sleep it off, but by morning I was sweating and couldn't stand up straight. My roommate drove me to the emergency room. It was appendicitis, emergency surgery. I was on my parents' health insurance plan, but because I was living away from home, the hospital billing department sent the paperwork to their address, not my dorm. I spent a week recovering, missing shifts at the coffee shop, eating ramen, and worrying about the copay. I called my mom to ask if any bills had arrived. "Don't worry about it," she told me over the phone, her voice breezy and light. "I'm handling the paperwork. Just focus on school." For once, I felt taken care of. I thought, maybe she's changing. Maybe she actually cares. 3 months later, I started getting calls from a collections agency. I ignored them at first, thinking it was a scam. Then a letter arrived at my dorm. Final notice. Past due. $2,800. I called the insurance company in a panic. The representative, a nice lady who sounded tired, typed for a moment and then said, "Honey, that claim was processed. We sent a reimbursement check for the out-of-network portion to the primary policyholder's address 6 weeks ago. It was cashed. It was cashed. I called home. No answer. I called my dad. No answer. Finally. I logged onto Facebook, and there it was, an album titled Lydia's Solo Reset Trip. There were photos of my mother in a wide-brimmed hat holding a margarita, photos of her on a white, sandy beach in Cabo, photos of her getting a massage on a cruise ship deck. The dates of the trip matched the date the check was cashed perfectly. When she finally answered her phone a week later, she didn't even deny it. "Elena, honestly," she sighed, as if I were boring her. "I use that money to recharge. Caring for a family is exhausting. If I'm not at my best, I can't be a good mother to you. So really, that trip was for us. Besides, you have a job. You can work out a payment plan. It builds character." I sat on the floor of my dorm room, staring at the phone. She had stolen $2,800 meant for my surgery to go drink tequila in Mexico. And she had framed it as an act of maternal love. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just hung up. For the next 3 years, I paid that hospital bill. $75 a month. Every time I wrote that check, I thought about her margarita. Every time I had to skip a social outing with friends because I was short on cash, I thought about her tan. I graduated, got a job as a project manager at a tech firm in Seattle, and moved 3 hours away. I needed distance. I needed rain. I needed to be somewhere where nobody knew Lydia. I thought I could just outrun it. I thought if I became successful enough, organized enough, and professional enough, the hurt would go away. In my job, I manage complex timelines, handle million-dollar budgets, and document every single risk factor. I am the person who keeps the receipts. I am the person who tracks the data. But you can't spreadsheet your way out of trauma. Last year, at 27, I finally admitted I wasn't okay. I was having panic attacks when my phone rang. I was apologizing to my boss for things that weren't my fault. I felt small, just like that kid in the leotard. So, I found Dr. Eris. Dr. Eris is a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a spine of steel. She was the first person who listened to the story about the dance class and the cruise money without telling me I was exaggerating. "Elena," she said during our 3rd session, setting her notepad down, "what you are describing isn't just strict parenting. Taking that check was theft, financial abuse, and the humiliation. That is a control tactic designed to keep you insecure so you never leave." Hearing it said out loud, theft, abuse, changed something in my brain chemistry. It wasn't just me being sensitive. It was real. For 6 months, I worked hard. I stopped answering Lydia's calls immediately. I started saying no to holiday demands. I established boundaries. I was healing. And that, of course, was the problem. Lydia didn't want a healed daughter. She wanted a puppet, and when the puppet stops dancing, the puppeteer gets angry. I made the mistake of mentioning Dr. Eris's name during a rare phone call with my mother. I said, "My therapist suggested I take some time for myself this weekend." The line went dead silent. Then Lydia's voice came through, low and dangerous. "A therapist? Why do you need a therapist? What are you telling a stranger about our family?" I should have hung up. I should have lied. Instead, I said, "I'm working through some things from my childhood. Mom. That was the match in the powder keg. I didn't know it then, but that single sentence started the countdown to her 50th birthday party. She viewed my healing as a declaration of war, and Lydia never loses a war. Or at least, she never used to. The escalation wasn't gradual. It was immediate. 2 days after I mentioned therapy, the text messages started. At first, they were just passive-aggressive articles forwarded without comment. How modern psychology is ruining families. Why ungrateful children are an epidemic. Then came the guilt trips. I cooked your favorite meal tonight. Shame you're too busy paying a stranger to complain about me. I ignored them. Dr. Eris had taught me the gray rock method. Be boring, be unresponsive, give them nothing to feed on. I thought it was working. I thought Lydia was just venting into the void. Yet I was wrong. She wasn't venting, she was hunting. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was in a budget meeting at work when my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Dr. Eris's office. That was weird. My appointment wasn't until Thursday. I stepped out into the hallway to listen. Hi, Elena. This is Sarah from the front desk. The receptionist's voice sounded shaky, strained. We've had a situation this morning. A woman claiming to be your mother has called the office 14 times in the last hour. She's demanding your medical records. She's screaming at staff. We've had to block her number, but she's calling from different lines. Dr. Eris wanted you to know. 14 times. In 1 hour. My stomach dropped to the floor. I felt that old, familiar sensation, the heat in my face, the instinct to shrink. I called back immediately, apologizing profusely. I am so sorry. I'll handle it. Please tell Dr. Eris I am so sorry. It's okay, Elena, Sarah said, but I could hear the tension in her voice. But you need to know. She left a voicemail on the general line after we stopped picking up. It's disturbing. Dr. Eris thinks you should hear it. I went to my car on my lunch break. I sat in the driver's seat, rain drumming against the windshield, and played the file Sarah had emailed me. My mother's voice filled the small space of my Honda Civic. It wasn't the sweet public voice she used for the neighbors. It was the low, venomous growl she used when the doors were closed. Listen to me, you little home wrecker, she hissed. I know what you're doing. You are turning my daughter into a monster. You are planting lies in her head to steal her money. She was fine before she met you. She was a good daughter. Now she's cold. She's cruel. I will make sure you never work in this state again. I will sue you for malpractice. I will destroy you. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. She was threatening a medical professional. She was threatening my safe space. But she didn't stop there. Lydia doesn't just cross lines. She erases them. That Friday, during my session, Dr. Eris looked more serious than usual. She sat down and placed a printed screenshot on the coffee table between us. Elena, she said calmly, I need to show you this. My husband received this message on Facebook yesterday. I picked up the paper. It was a direct message from Lydia to Dr. Eris's husband, a man she had never met, or whose name she must have dug up through hours of internet stalking. The message read, Your wife is a predator. She steals daughters. She convinces them their mothers are evil so she can keep billing them. You should check her bank accounts. She's running a scam. Tell her to release Elena's files to me, or I will post about her ethics on every community page in Seattle. I felt like I was going to throw up. The violation was so total, so complete. She had hunted down my doctor's personal life, her family, her husband. She was trying to bomb the only bridge I had built out of her chaos. I can file a restraining order, Dr. Eris said gently, but I wanted to discuss it with you first. No, I said. The word came out before I even thought about it. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, hard, cold. No restraining order yet. Not yet. I didn't know why I said it then. I just knew that a piece of paper wouldn't stop Lydia. She would just frame herself as the victim, the martyr mother whose daughter sent the police after her. She would spin it. She always spun it. I needed something she couldn't spin. 3 days later, the invitation arrived in the mail. Heavy cream cardstock, gold foil lettering, Lydia's 50th birthday jubilee. Join us for a night of celebration, reflection, and family love. It was the trap. I knew exactly how it would go. I would be expected to show up, smile, pose for photos, and play the role of the dutiful daughter. If I didn't go, I was the villain who abandoned her mom on her milestone birthday. If I did go, I was submitting to her control. I looked at the invitation, then I looked at the screenshot of the message she sent to Dr. Eris's husband. Something inside me clicked. It was a physical sensation, like a gear locking into place. The fear evaporated. The shame vanished. All that was left was a cold, mathematical clarity. She wanted reflection. She wanted family love. She wanted everyone to look at her. Fine. I would give her exactly what she wanted. I picked up my phone and texted my Aunt June, my mother's younger, quieter sister, who had always looked at me with pity but never intervened. Aunt June, I wrote, I'm coming to the party. Can you make sure the microphone is set up for speeches? I have something I want to say. I wasn't going as a guest. I was going as a witness. The week before, the party wasn't spent shopping for a dress or writing a sentimental card. It was spent building a case. I took a personal day off work. I woke up at 6 a.m. You made a pot of strong coffee and cleared off my dining room table. I placed my laptop in the center, a fresh notebook on the left, and a stack of manila folders on the right. I picked up a black Sharpie and wrote one word across the front of the top folder. Evidence. It felt ridiculous for a second. I was a daughter, not a detective. But then I remembered the sound of my mother's voice calling my therapist a predator. I remembered the $2,800 she stole. I opened my laptop. I started printing. First, the screenshots Dr. Eris had sent me, the messages to her husband. The timestamps showed she had sent them at 2 a.m. print. Next, the call logs from Dr. Eris's office that Sarah, the receptionist, had kindly anonymized and forwarded to me after I explained I needed them for legal protection. 14 calls in 1 hour, print. Then, I dug deeper. I logged into my old bank account, the one I had in college. I found the archived statement from 9 years ago, the insurance reimbursement deposit, the withdrawal slip with Lydia's signature. I printed the statement. Then I found the Facebook photos of her Mexico trip. Same dates. Print. I laid the papers out on the table. It wasn't just drama. It wasn't just a complicated mother-daughter relationship. It was a timeline of theft, harassment, and abuse. Seeing it all physically laid out in black and white changed something in me. I stopped feeling like a crazy person. I felt like a prosecutor reviewing a winning file. I organized everything into the folder, chronological order, tabbed, highlighted. The next step was legal. I couldn't just walk in there and yell. That's what a child does. I needed authority. I made an appointment with a lawyer recommended by a colleague. Ms. Vance was a sharp-eyed woman in a charcoal suit who listened to my story without interrupting. She looked at the screenshots of the messages to Dr. Eris's husband. This is textbook harassment, Ms. Vance said, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. In Washington state, this could easily be grounds for a civil protection order. She's interfering with your medical care. She's slandering a professional. It's actionable. I don't want to sue her yet, I said. I want her to stop, and I want her to know that I'm not playing anymore. Ms. Vance nodded. Then we draft a formal cease and desist. It's a warning shot. It states clearly that if she contacts Dr. Eris, her family, or you regarding this matter again, legal action will be immediate. It's not a court order. What? But it carries legal weight. It shows you've lawyered up. Do it, I said. Draft it today. Spending $300 on that letter felt better than any spa day I had ever paid for. When I held the document, heavy paper, legal letterhead, cease and desist in bold at the top, I felt a kind of power I had never experienced before. It was a shield. The final piece of the puzzle was the audio. I had the voicemail file on my phone, but playing it from a phone speaker wouldn't be enough. A phone is tinny, it's weak. In a room full of 25 people talking and drinking wine, it would get lost. I went to Best Buy. I walked down the audio aisle and found a portable Bluetooth speaker, small enough to fit in my large tote bag, but powerful enough to fill a room. I tested it in the aisle, connecting my phone and playing a song. The bass thumped against my chest. Perfect. I bought it. I went home and practiced. I sat in my living room, the speaker on the coffee table. I rehearsed the sequence. Walk to the front, set the folder down, pull out the speaker, hit play. I timed it. The voicemail was 45 seconds long, 45 seconds of pure, unfiltered Lydia. The night before the party, I had my final session with Dr. Eris. I told her what I was planning. I expected her to tell me to stop. I expected her to say it was aggressive or that it wouldn't bring me closure. She looked at me for a long time. Then she leaned forward. Elena, she said softly, therapy isn't about being nice. It's about being healthy. Sometimes health looks like silence, and sometimes health looks like holding up a mirror and forcing people to look at themselves. She paused. Maury, just make sure you are doing this for you. Not to change her, because she won't change, but to free yourself. I know she won't change, I said. I just want everyone else to know the truth. I'm tired of her hiding behind her reputation. Then go, Dr. Eris said, and breathe. I drove home, I packed my bag, the folder, the speaker, the cease and desist letter, my car keys. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like the scared 12-year-old in the leotard anymore. I looked like a woman who was done paying for sins she didn't commit. I was ready. Would you have the guts to do this? Would you walk into a room full of family and expose your own mother? Or would you have just blocked her number and ghosted? I honestly didn't know if I could do it until I got out of the car. Let me know what you would have done in the comments. I pulled up to my childhood home at 6:45 p.m. The driveway was already full of cars. I recognized Aunt June's sedan, the SUVs of the neighborhood book club ladies, and the shiny Lexus belonging to Mrs. Gable, the president of the HOA. The house looked perfect. String lights twinkled on the front porch. The lawn was freshly mowed. From the outside, it was the picture of suburban bliss. It was a lie. I checked my bag one last time. Folder, speaker, letter. My hands were shaking, but my breathing was steady. I told myself, "You are not a daughter tonight. You are a witness." I walked in. The living room was packed, 25 people, mostly women in their 50s and 60s, holding glasses of white wine and eating crab puffs. Soft jazz was playing. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted chicken. When I walked in, when the conversation lulled for a split second, heads turned, I saw the whispers. "Oh, Elena made it." "She looks tired." "Is that the one Lydia was talking about?" Lydia spotted me from across the room. She was wearing a gold sequin dress that was a little too tight and holding court near the fireplace. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me, but then the mask slipped back on. She gave a tight, fake smile and waved me over. "Elena!" she announced, her voice pitched high and sweet. "Everyone, my daughter actually decided to grace us with her presence. I wasn't sure if her busy schedule would allow it." A few people chuckled politely. I didn't smile. I walked over and gave her a stiff hug. She smelled like Chardonnay and hairspray. "You're late," she hissed in my ear, her nails digging into my arm. Smile. "Mrs. Gable is watching." "Happy birthday, Mom," I said flatly. I pulled away and moved to the corner of the room. For the next hour, I watched. I watched her charm the neighbors. I watched her play the victim to her sisters, dabbing at dry eyes while talking about how hard it is to be a mother these days. I watched her soak up the adoration. It was a performance, and she was winning an Oscar. Then came the speeches. Aunt June tapped a spoon against her glass. Everyone, quiet down, please. It's time for the birthday toast." The room went silent. Aunt June said a few nice, generic things about Lydia being a pillar of the community. Then, predictably, Lydia took the floor. She stood in front of the fireplace, the center of attention. She took a sip of champagne and sighed dramatically. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. 50 years. It's been a journey. I look around this room and I see so much love. My friends, my sisters." She paused. She turned her head and locked eyes with me in the back corner. "And my daughter, Elena." The room turned to look at me. I stood perfectly still. "You know," Lydia continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "being a mother is the hardest job in the world. You give everything, your body, your money, your youth. And sometimes," she shook her head sadly, "sometimes they just drift away. They get influenced by the wrong people." She took another sip. She was enjoying this. She was using her birthday speech to publicly shame me. "I just wish," she said louder now, "that my daughter would stop letting that doctor brainwash her. She's become so cold to her own mother. It breaks my heart, really. But I suppose some people just need to pay someone to tell them they're victims." The room was dead silent. A few people looked at their shoes. Mrs. Gable looked uncomfortable. That was the line. That was the signal. I didn't feel angry. I felt something much colder. I felt the weight of the speaker in my bag. I walked forward. I didn't rush. I didn't stomp. I just walked through the crowd, people parting for me like the Red Sea. I walked right up to the fireplace, standing next to Lydia. She looked surprised. She whispered, "What are you doing? Sit down." I ignored her. I placed my tote bag on the small table next to the fireplace. I pulled out the manila folder labeled Evidence and set it down with a heavy thud. Then I pulled out the speaker. Where I set it next to the folder, I turned it on. A small blue light blinked. Beep, boop, connected. I turned to the room. 25 faces stared back at me. Confusion, curiosity, fear. "You want to talk about my health, Mom?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silence, it carried to the back of the kitchen. You want to talk about who is brainwashing who? Let's talk about it. Elena, don't you dare, Lydia hissed. Her face had gone pale beneath her makeup. You are making a scene. No, I said. I'm finishing the scene you started. I looked at the crowd. My mother just told you that my therapist is brainwashing me. She told you I'm cold. What she didn't tell you is that last week, she called my doctor's office 14 times in 1 hour because I set a boundary. But she didn't tell you she messaged my doctor's husband, a man she has never met, to accuse his wife of being a predator. A gasp went through the room. Aunt June's hand went to her mouth. Liar! Lydia shrieked. It was a raw, ugly sound. She's lying. She's mentally unstable. That's why she's in therapy. Am I? I asked. I picked up my phone. I hit play. The sound quality was crystal clear. The bass of the speaker made Lydia's voice sound even deeper, even more menacing. Listen to me, you little home wrecker. I know what you're doing. You are turning my daughter into a monster. I will make sure you never work in this state again. I will destroy you. Lydia lunged for the speaker. Turn it off right now. I sidestepped her easily. The recording continued. She was a good daughter. Now she's cold. She's cruel. The room was frozen. Mrs. Gable's mouth was hanging open. The book club ladies looked like they had just watched a murder. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I didn't let up. I opened the folder. And just so we're clear on the financial side of things, I said, pulling out the printed screenshot of the messages to Dr. Eris's husband. Here are the messages she sent to a stranger's spouse. I held the paper up. Then I handed it to Aunt June, who was standing in the front row. Read it, June, I said. Aunt June took the paper. Her hands were shaking. She read the highlighted text. Her eyes went wide. She looked up at her sister. Lydia, June whispered, you wrote this? Your wife is a predator who steals daughters? She hacked my account, Lydia screamed. She was frantic now, looking around the room for an ally. Elena made that up. It's Photoshop. And the voicemail? I asked. Is my voice an impersonator too? Lydia sputtered. She looked at her friends. No one was making eye contact with her. They were looking at her like she was a stranger. I reached into the folder one last time. I pulled out the document on the thick, cream-colored legal paper. I've spent $5,200 this year on therapy just to fix what you broke, I told her. I'm done paying for your insecurities. I handed her the letter. This is a formal cease and desist from my lawyer, I announced to the room. If you contact Dr. Eris, her staff, or her family again, we will file for a restraining order and sue you for harassment. If you come to my house, I will call the police. We are done. Lydia stared at the letter in her hands. Her hands were trembling so hard the paper rattled. Then the tears started. How could you? She wailed, collapsing onto the ottoman in a theatrical heap. On my birthday! After everything I've done for you, I carried you for 9 months. I sacrificed my life for you. Usually this worked. Usually Aunt June would rush to comfort her. Usually the neighbors would coo sympathetically. Tonight nobody moved. Aunt June looked at the screenshot in her hand. Then she looked at her sobbing sister. She dropped the paper on the coffee table. This is unhinged, Lydia, Aunt June said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the sobbing. You're harassing a doctor because you can't control your daughter. June, Lydia gasped. You're taking her side. I'm taking the side of sanity, June said. She looked at me. Elena, do you have a ride? I drove, I said. Good, June said. Get your things. You shouldn't be here. I packed my speaker back into my bag. I closed the folder. I looked at my mother one last time. She was a mess of gold sequins and smeared mascara, clutching a legal threat on her lap, surrounded by friends who were suddenly realizing they didn't know her at all. Happy birthday, Mom, I said. I turned around and walked out. I didn't look back. The silence followed me all the way to the door. The drive back to my apartment in Seattle was the quietest 45 minutes of my life. The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon, but for the first time in 28 years, the noise inside my head had finally stopped. The knot that had lived in my chest since the dance class when I was 12? It was gone. It had been replaced by a heavy, satisfying coldness. I was halfway home when my phone started to buzz. It wasn't just a text. It was a rhythmic, frantic vibration against the center console of my car. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it was. The evidence had been presented, the verdict had been delivered, and now the defendant was screaming. By the time I pulled into my parking garage and turned off the engine, I sat in the silence for a moment, watching the screen of my phone light up over and over again. 74 notifications. I scrolled through them with a steady hand. 42 missed calls from Lydia, 15 texts from Lydia, 8 texts from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, 9 notifications from Facebook. The messages from Lydia arrived in a frantic, incoherent stream. "How could you do this to me? You're a monster. You're the one who needs help. Wait until your father hears about this. You've ruined my life. I hope you're happy. Pick up the phone right now, or I'm calling the police and telling them you stole from the house." I didn't reply. I didn't feel the urge to explain. One of the most powerful things Dr. Aris taught me was that you don't owe an explanation to someone who only wants to use your words as weapons. I simply set the phone face down on the passenger seat and walked up to my apartment. But while I was silent, the rest of the world wasn't. By 10 p.m., the social media warfare had begun. Lydia, true to form, tried to strike first. She posted a photo on Facebook, an old picture of us from my high school graduation, back when I was still wearing the mask of the dutiful daughter. The caption was classic Lydia. "Some people forget where they came from. Some people let strangers fill their heads with poison until they can't see the hands that fed them. Heartbroken on my 50th birthday. Hashtag family. First, hashtag heartbroken. Hashtag pray for Elena." In the past, this would have worked. Within minutes, the usual flying monkeys started commenting. Distant relatives and old neighbors who hadn't been at the party wrote things like, "Oh, Lydia, stay strong." And kids these days have no respect. But this time, there was a difference. The party had been witnessed. 25 people had seen the speaker. 25 people had heard the home wrecker voicemail. And one of those people was Mrs. Gable, the president of the HOA and the reigning queen of neighborhood gossip. I watched the turn happen in real time. Gable commented first. "Lydia, we all heard the recording tonight. Maybe we should focus on the poison in those voicemails instead of hashtags." Then Aunt June stepped in. Aunt June, who had been the silent enabler for decades, finally found her voice. She didn't post a long paragraph. She just posted one thing, a photo of the cease and desist letter I had left on the coffee table. Under the photo, June wrote, "Stop it, Lydia. You were harassing a doctor. We all heard it. We all saw the proof. Delete this and get actual help." The post was gone within 10 minutes. Lydia couldn't handle the one thing she feared most, a counter-narrative she couldn't control. Over the next week, the consequences began to itemize themselves like a receipt I didn't have to pay. First, the social fallout. The neighborhood book club, Yin, which had met at my mother's house every third Thursday for 6 years, sent a group email. One of the members, a woman named Linda, who had always been kind to me, forwarded it to me. It was short and professional. They were moving the meetings to Linda's house permanently. They felt uncomfortable returning to a home where such hostility and legal issues were present. Translation: they didn't want to be associated with a woman who was one step away from a restraining order. Second, the family fracture. Aunt June called me 3 days after the party. She told me she had blocked Lydia's number. "I stayed quiet for too long, Elena," June said, her voice sounding older, tired. "I watched her treat you like a project instead of a person. But hearing her voice on that speaker, hearing the hate she had for a doctor just trying to help you, and I can't unhear that. I told her I'm taking a long break from our relationship." For the first time, the golden child of the family, Lydia, was the one on the outside looking in. Third, the neighborhood reputation. My mother's perfect reputation didn't just crack, it shattered. People in the cul-de-sac stopped waving when she drove by. The woman who was always invited to every brunch and every baby shower suddenly found her mailbox empty of invitations. In a community built on appearances, Lydia had become the one thing no one wanted to look at, a documented harasser. Fourth, the professional wall. Dr. Aris contacted me the following week. She informed me that after the cease and desist was delivered, the calls to her office stopped instantly. The lawyer, Ms. Vance, had followed up with a stern phone call to my mother's house, reminding her that every single message she had sent to Dr. Aris's husband was now part of a permanent legal file. Lydia had tried to play a high-stakes game of chicken with a professional's life, and she had lost. I sat in my Seattle apartment watching the rain hit the window. I didn't feel gleeful. I didn't dance. I just felt clean. I went through my house and did a Lydia purge. I took down the photos she had picked out for me. I threw away the inspirational plaques she had bought me that all centered around being a good daughter. I even changed my locks, not because I thought she would break in, but because the physical act of turning a key she didn't have felt like a final seal on a tomb. I realized then that the most satisfying revenge isn't a loud explosion, it's the silence that follows. Or it's the moment the phone stops buzzing because you finally realized you don't have to pick it up. Lydia was still in that house, surrounded by gold sequins and fading birthday balloons, trying to figure out how to be the victim in a story where everyone had seen her hold the knife. And I was here, in the gray Seattle light, free. Is this revenge or is it just justice? Some people say that exposing your family is a betrayal, no matter what they did. Others say that the truth is the only way to set yourself free. Do you think I went too far by playing that recording in front of her friends? Or was it the only way to make her stop? Drop your answer below and subscribe. I post stories about people who finally stopped being the victim every single week. It has been 4 months since the party. These days, my life looks boring from the outside, and honestly, that's exactly how I like it. I wake up in my 1-bedroom apartment in Seattle that smells like coffee and damp earth instead of my mother's overpowering vanilla candles. There's a small desk by the window where my laptop waits, a yoga mat rolled up in the corner, not for dance class but for me, and a stack of books that Lydia would have called trash. But I find interesting. I make my own coffee, I pay my own bills, I check my own mail, and every single time I see a doctor's appointment reminder on my phone, I don't feel fear. I feel gratitude. The contrast between who I was and who I am now is stark. Before, I was the girl in the back of the dance class, praying to disappear. Now I am the woman who walked to the front of the room. Before, I was the teenager paying off a $2,800 debt for a surgery I barely survived while my mother drank margaritas. Now I am the project manager who keeps her own receipts. Before, I felt responsible for Lydia's happiness. Now, I am only responsible for my own peace. It isn't always easy. I want to be honest about that. Some Tuesday nights, when the rain is particularly heavy and the apartment feels a little too quiet, I almost pick up the phone. My thumb hovers over her name in my blocked list. A tiny, conditioned part of my brain whispers, maybe she's sorry. Maybe if you just explain it one more time, she'll understand. Then I remember the sound of her voice on that speaker. You little homewrecker. I remember the $2,800. I remember the look on Dr. Eris's face when she showed me the messages to her husband, and I put the phone down. I did the math recently. Between the lawyer, the therapy sessions, the cease and desist letter, and the portable speaker, I spent about $5,200 this year on this project. Lydia would say that's a waste of money. She would say I should have saved it, or bought a nicer car, or invested in a wardrobe that would make me look successful. But when I sit on my balcony and watch the ferries cross the Puget Sound, breathing air that doesn't feel heavy with expectation, I realize it was the best investment I ever made. I didn't buy a product. I bought my freedom. Lydia is still in that house. From what Aunt June tells me, on the rare occasions we speak, my mother has doubled down. She tells the few people who will listen that I'm going through a mental crisis and that she's praying for my return. She has rewritten the story to make herself the tragic heroine waiting for the prodigal daughter. But here's the thing about stories. They only work if the audience believes them. And thanks to that folder and that speaker, her audience is gone. The last time I visited my hometown was to finalize some paperwork at the bank. I drove past the house. The curtains were drawn. The driveway was empty. No book club cars, no neighbors stopping by. Just a perfect manicured lawn and a house full of secrets that no one wants to hear anymore. I didn't stop, I didn't slow down. I just kept driving, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror until it was just a small, insignificant dot. Then I turned the corner, merged onto the highway and let the distance grow. I closed that door, I turned the lock, and for the first time in 28 years, I didn't look back to see if she was watching. If your family ever made you feel like you owed them your future just for existing, I hope this story reminds you, you don't. You are allowed to be the villain in their story if it means being the hero in yours. Share your story in the comments. This is a safe space. And subscribe for more content about setting boundaries and choosing yourself.